How optimistic should LSU fans feel about this offense post Jayden Daniels, Malik Nabers, and Brian Thomas Jr.?
You are Locked On LSU, your daily podcast on the LSU Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, y'all? Welcome into Locked On LSU. Thank you for making us your first listen every single day as I try to get a little bit of light here. There we go. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts. We are also on YouTube as well. So subscribe to YouTube, like the videos, comment on the videos, rate, review, subscribe on your preferred podcast platform. However you listen, wherever you listen, and however you interact with the podcast. Always appreciate you for making us your first listen every single day. Let's get into it. So, do a little bit of a two-sided podcast today. First, I want to look ahead to LSU's offense in 2024, reasons for optimism after this electric offense that we saw this past season. And then we will catch up with the host of Locked On Commanders to take a look back on what this past season was like with Jayden Daniels under center and what LSU did for Jayden Daniels, what Jayden Daniels can do in the league moving forward. But first, I want to focus in on reasons for optimism for LSU, specifically offensively, because there are reasons for optimism defensively, but, we're going to temper our expectations there. I'm never going to say it can be worse, because it always can be. But I want to focus in on the offense, because I feel like so many times when I talk about how look, I get it. I understand that you lose the Heisman Trophy winning quarterback and 2,000-yard receivers, one that led college football in receptions and receiving yards, and another that led all of college football in receiving touchdowns. You lose all three of those first-round draft picks. You might expect a step back. You might expect a less explosive offense. I mean, that's fair, right? We would expect that if it was any other team other than LSU, we would probably be saying, you're losing Jayden Daniels, Brian Thomas Jr., Malik Nabers, good luck. But I feel like whenever I say that that's not my reason for concern, that I expect LSU's offense not to rebuild, but to reload and be right back out there scoring 40 to 45 points a game. I feel like some people look at me like I'm crazy. Not necessarily LSU fans, but maybe those that aren't as familiar with the LSU program. They're like, oh, okay, homer. And I'm like, look, I get it. I'll acknowledge when I have a homer take. I can acknowledge when I'm being a homer. But really, I think that the reason for optimism is totally fair and totally justified. And a big part of the reason why is because of Garrett Nussmeier. On ESPN.com, they broke down every single first round draft pick and who the heir apparent is going to be. This is Mark Schlabach of ESPN.com writes, of course, obviously we know the replacement Garrett Nussmeier says the Tigers are undergoing a complete makeover on offense after Daniels, the reigning Heisman Trophy winner, and his 2,000-yard receivers Malik Nabers and Brian Thomas Jr. were selected in the first round. Former LSU offensive coordinator Mike Denbrock departed for Notre Dame as well. I mean, that's another aspect of this. It's not just the on-the-field production. You're also losing your offensive coordinator, and even still, I am not concerned about it. Maybe I should be. Please tell me if I should be. But frankly, I'm just not. That's where I expect the strong suit to be with this team. But I'll continue with what Mark Schlabach says. He writes, LSU coach Brian Kelly promoted quarterbacks coach Joe Sloan and receivers coach and passing game coordinator Cortez Hankton to co-offensive coordinators, with Sloan taking over the play calling. The good news, quarterback Garrett Nussmeier is more than ready to take over. He waited 3 seasons behind Daniels and was MVP of the ReliaQuest Bowl after passing for 395 yards with 3 scores and a 35-31 victory over Wisconsin. That's where the root of my encouragement comes from. Because who is going to be, I expect Kyron Lacey to be a wide receiver 1. Who's going to be 2 and 3? I don't know. But I'm confident that somebody in that room is going to emerge and is going to be pretty darn good at it. What does the run game look like? I still think that's a bit of a question mark. I'm not too worried about it because I think I'm placing enough faith in Garrett Nussmeier to not be overly concerned. I'm placing enough faith in Joe Sloan and Cortez Hankton, their understanding of this offense and their understanding of this roster. I'm not too concerned about it. Now, again, fast forward to September, if LSU struggles to find the end zone, if LSU's averaging 14 points a game, if LSU all of a sudden turns into Iowa, no offense to Iowa, then then I will bite my tongue. Then I will say I was wrong. But today on April 30th, I don't have those concerns. And Vegas doesn't have those concerns either. I'm looking at the 2025 Heisman Trophy odds. I guess that would technically be 2024, December of 2024. But this upcoming season, I'm looking at the way too early Heisman Trophy odds. Now, I understand. I know that on April 30th, those aren't always the fairest projections because if we go back to April 30th of 2023, Jayden Daniels probably isn't the favorite to win the Heisman Trophy. So I understand that things change and that our perceptions will absolutely change once we actually see football being played. But as of right now, perception is reality. And right now, Garrett Nussmeier, according to the FanDuel Sportsbook app, we love FanDuel here on this program, Garrett Nussmeier has the eighth best odds to win the Heisman Trophy at plus 1,800. Now, I know those are long odds. I get it. I know. And I know eighth isn't necessarily top three. But for a guy that has never taken a snap as a starter, eighth best odds behind Carson Beck, who was the starter at Georgia this past season, behind Quinn Ewers, who has been at Texas for what feels like, honestly, like 10 years at this point. I know it hasn't been that long. Behind a quarterback like Jackson Dart, who has been a starter, who has been in Ole Miss's offense for the last, what has been 2 seasons, coming back for his third. Like, I think that that's a testament to the belief that Vegas and the general public has in Garrett Nussmeier. Now, Vegas isn't everything, and Vegas doesn't know everything, but Vegas knows a lot because there's a reason why there are bright lights and tall buildings in the middle of the desert because Vegas knows a thing or two. So I don't think that us as LSU fans have had those concerns about the offense, but I think it's more so a message outside to everyone looking at me and telling me that I'm crazy, sounding like a homer, not being concerned about a potential step back for this LSU offense. And look, maybe there will be, but it's not at the top of my concern list. It's more questions than it is concerns. And I think that's a really encouraging place for this LSU team to be in. That it's not rebuild, it's reload. And that's how you build national championship programs. That you're not left wondering who's going to play in that position. Now, the defense, that's a different story. Who the heck is playing left tackle? Defensive tackle. I don't know. But at least offensively, reload, not rebuild. All right, coming up next, we'll catch up with Locked On Commanders. I sat down with Locked On Commanders to break down exactly, what Washington is getting in their future franchise quarterback in Jayden Daniels. My conversation with David Harrison, host of Locked On Commanders, coming up after just a few words from our sponsors. I want to tell you about Game Time. So, Game Time is an authorized ticket marketplace of the NBA, which makes getting playoff tickets even faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer that it gets to tip off. So, I am somebody that procrastinates. I understand. I acknowledge it. I also procrastinate when it comes to getting tickets. But with Game Time, I'm almost incentivized to do so because I know that I'm always getting the best price and Game Time is seriously the easiest way to buy tickets. All you have to do is click a couple of buttons and then boom, the ticket is right to your phone, sent directly to you. It seriously could not be an easier experience to find great tickets at a great price. And also, you get what you see is what you get on the Game Time app. Once you click on a potential ticket that you like, you can get a full panoramic view from your seat before you buy. So you know exactly what you're committing to before you get to the arena or the park or the field or the stage or wherever you might be going. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off of your first order. Again, terms apply. Create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, I also want to let you know about FanDuel. It's playoff time in the NBA and the NHL, and baseball is in full swing. So, FanDuel is your place to bet on every single game. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150, win or lose. I mean, who doesn't want that? Bet on everything from slap shots to home runs to slam dunks, all on an app that is safe, secure, and oh so easy to use. So if you're looking for something to bet on in the Stanley Cup playoffs, I'm looking at the Colorado Avalanche against the Winnipeg Jets. Colorado is currently leading this series 3-1. They play on Tuesday night. I think that Colorado is always a safe bet, and I think that they're going to want to close it out tonight. So I would take Colorado on the money line. But hey, that's my take. Do it how you want to do it, and do it with FanDuel. What are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com/locked on and make your first bet an automatic win. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook.
And we're joined now by Caroline Fenton at Caroline Fenton 1 on Twitter. Another person who can't just use her name like I can't. You just use my name on Twitter because that's how it works. Host of Locked On LSU. And Caroline, of course, we're here to talk about Jayden Daniels, the new franchise quarterback for the Washington Commanders. And let's start there. What were your expectations for Jayden heading into the NFL draft? Any surprises at the end that he was taken number 2 overall by Washington?
And really no surprises. And I think that had been a lot of the talk that Washington had, their pick of really great and also really great with Drake May and Jayden Daniels. But leading into the draft, there was just so much smoke and so much conversation, and all signs really pointed toward Jayden Daniels being selected 2 overall. Could that have been a smokescreen? I did consider that at some point. Like, is this just Adam Peters' way of trying to stir the pot a little bit? But sitting at 2, I think they felt comfortable enough in their position that Jayden Daniels would be available, making the assumption that Caleb Williams would be number 1 to the Bears, which I think we've all known that for a very long time now. It really came as no surprise to me, mostly because of a lot of the conversation that was coming out and some of the tidbits that were coming out from reporters, but also because I thought that Cliff Kingsbury was going to look at the quarterbacks that were available to him in this draft and pick out Jayden Daniels as being one that has the tools to thrive in his offense. Look at Kyler Murray with a very similar skill set to Jayden Daniels. Look at Johnny Manziel, some of the off-platform, kind of improvisational throws that he made at Texas A&M under Cliff Kingsbury. Obviously, Patrick Mahomes at Texas Tech. Now, I'm not saying necessarily that Jayden Daniels is going to be the next Patrick Mahomes. I'm sure Washington fans hope so, but he fits a very similar skill set as all the rest of those quarterbacks, that it didn't come as a surprise to me in the slightest that Cliff Kingsbury would pick Jayden Daniels for his to be his next franchise quarterback.
Yeah, absolutely. And I caught your draft day episode of Locked On LSU, and you mentioned 3 potential fits for Jayden Daniels. And that was really interesting because the second fit was the Minnesota Vikings. They ended up going J.J. McCarthy, and it since came out that the Washington Commanders, if they didn't go Jayden for whatever reason, it would have been JJ, not Drake, which a lot of people thought it was been Drake. So those fits obviously make a lot of sense. The Vikings and the Commanders essentially looking for the same type of quarterback. And then, of course, you mentioned the Raiders. There were some rumors about the Las Vegas Raiders that we'll get to here in just a second. But first, I want to stick to the play on the field. Let's talk about his play. What does he do best after covering him at LSU for a couple years? What do you say that Jayden Daniels does best on the football field?
The first thing that comes to mind is obviously his running ability, that he is an elite runner. The speed and also the elusiveness, that he's wiggly, like he's slippery. That's like when you watch him, that's really the only words that come to mind, because he'll find these tiny little holes and find a way to make it a 30, 40, 50-yard gain out of it. That I think that a lot of comparisons have been made between himself and Lamar Jackson. It's an imperfect comparison, and I see why the comparisons are being made. I look at Lamar Jackson as more of a power runner, whereas Jayden Daniels is so much more of an elusive runner, that if you let him go, he's gone. Like he's to the house. So the running ability is obviously one thing that comes to mind, because I think that's what differentiates him from the rest of the quarterbacks in this draft, is his running ability. It's what separated him from the rest of the quarterbacks in all of college football. He led all quarterbacks in rushing yards this past season by a mile. It wasn't even close. Yeah. But when we talk about Jayden Daniels, I feel like his running ability is obviously going to be the first thing that we talk about, because it's what makes him different. It's what sets him apart. But don't let that overshadow the fact that he is an elite passer as well. That there isn't a throw that Jayden Daniels can't make. He led all quarterbacks in college football this past season and completions of 20 yards or more, quote unquote, explosive plays, if you want to call that a play of 20 or more yards. That he is so nails and big throws when you need him to be made. I would say the one weakness, though, there in the passing game might be in the more intermediate passing game, that if you need him to make a 50-yard throw, like he can make it. Like he's got the arm to be able to make a throw like that. But I think some of the areas that he struggled just a little bit was in the necessarily the boomer bust plays, like the Hail Marys, like the F it Malik or Brian Thomas is down there somewhere kind of plays. It was the, we need a short 6, 7, 8 yard pickup. Maybe that wasn't necessarily his bread and butter or where he was most accurate.
Yeah, and then that's kind of where some of the questions have come in about Jayden Daniels and whether or not he's going to fit in the NFL and be able to have long-term success, but also over the middle. So I wanted to ask you about that specifically because I've talked to some people who said he can do it. They just didn't ask him to do it a lot at LSU. I've heard some people say, well, they didn't ask him to do it a lot because he can't do it. So like, which side of that conversation are you on? Are you worried about Jayden Daniels and his ability to use the middle of the field in the NFL, considering the game gets a lot more condensed at the pro level, as you know?
Totally. I wouldn't be concerned about it because I viewed this past season more so as they didn't ask him to do it because they didn't need him to do it. Because if you know that you have two elite receivers that have the speed to get downfield and have the ability to win those one-on-one matchups, and you have a quarterback that can air it out 50 yards, like, why wouldn't you? Right? It seems like a no-brainer. And if you look back at a lot of LSU's offense this past season, a lot of it was in those explosive plays because they could do it. LSU's defense was horrendous this past season, and the only way that they were going to win games was by putting up 60-something points, because if they didn't, they were probably going to give up 60-something in the process. So it really was such an air-it-out kind of offense because they had the ability to do that. They had the talent that fit that, and it's also what they needed to do to win games. Go back to 2022 if you want to see kind of what I'm talking about here in more of the over the middle kind of throws. We didn't see Jayden Daniels' development as a passer really get to the level of what we see it now, an NFL caliber quarterback, an elite quarterback, until 2023. In 2022, I think Jayden Daniels was still learning the offense at LSU. Reminder, he transferred to LSU from Arizona State after 3 years at Arizona State. He was still getting acclimated to the offense at LSU. I think he was still just trying to gain the trust of the offensive line, of a lot of the pass catchers. It was a young offensive line. In 2022, in Jayden Daniels' first season at LSU, they had two bookend true freshman tackles. So I think there was maybe a little bit of hesitation there, a little bit of, anxiety of, are these young guys that have never played football at this level going to be able to protect me? So I think Jayden Daniels relied a lot more on those over the middle kind of throws in 2022 when they didn't have as much of an air it out kind of pass game. Once you saw it click, the chemistry with the receivers, chemistry with the O-line, and his understanding of the offense, that's when you really start to see those explosive plays become more of an integral part of the offense. He can do it. We have seen him be able to do it. Just didn't need to, because why would you?
Yeah. More coming up with Locked On LSU host Caroline Fenton. But before we do that,
all right, game off. We got to pause here to talk more about Monopoly Go. I know what you're saying, flag on the play. You already talked about that, but there is just so much good stuff in this game. In Monopoly Go, you can team up with your friends for timed tournaments where you work together to build up each other's boards, and the more you win together, the more awesome prizes you unlock. Who doesn't love that teamwork? There's so much to get. There's unique stickers that you can trade with friends to complete albums for big prizes. There's cool new playing pieces to travel the boards with, and hilarious emojis for taunting your friends when you smash their buildings or heist their vaults. Plus, Monopoly Go feels new and exciting every single day with constantly changing tournaments and challenges, but it also makes you feel a little bit nostalgic about the classic Monopoly game. A ton include their own mini games like digging for treasure or a robot pachinko machine. So much fun. And there's always new timed events that help you win big, like massive multipliers for everything you win or rent frenzies. There's always something fun to discover in Monopoly Go. So get off the bench and go download it now for free on Google Play or the App Store. Game on.
the other knock on his game are the sacks. Let's talk about the sacks. What can you tell us about those? Because again, I've talked to some people who said that he's just trying to make plays, and you want that competitive spirit in him. But then I've heard of a lot of people, obviously more people than not, who are worried that he's going to be another RG3. And going to Washington, that doesn't help that comparison. When Washington fans literally live through the RG3 experience, does the high sack rates and the high amount of hits that he takes on the football field concern you?
I wouldn't say the sack rates concern me nearly as much as just the sheer number of hits that he takes and his reluctance to slide. I mean, so many times I'm watching a game and I'm just wince because let's be honest, Jayden Daniels isn't the biggest of guys. He's 210 pounds, 6'4", 6'5". Like, he's a tall and lanky guy. He's incredibly tough. Go back to the Missouri game, the LSU game at Missouri. He took a massive hit. He came off the field for a couple of plays with a bruised rib, came back out and was able to finish the game. So he is a tough son of a gun. But let's be honest, like, the play ramps up in the NFL. The players are bigger in the NFL. He's not going to be able to take hits like that as consistently as he did at the college level. And it's NFL, not for long. So I think that is a concern. And that's something that they're going to have to work on with Jayden Daniels is it's okay to slide. And that's a difficult double-edged sword that you're working with, right? Because you want to protect your franchise quarterback, especially one that isn't the heaviest, that doesn't have the biggest of bodies. But you also don't want to take Superman's cape away from him. You don't want to take Jayden Daniels' legs away from him because that's part of what makes him so special. So I think it's absolutely something that he's going to have to get acclimated to at the league. Maybe he's going to have to get roughed up a couple of times and learn it the hard way. But that's absolutely something that I think should be on the high list of priorities for the Washington Commanders, is working with him when to take those hits, when to slide, and when to say, hey, it's okay to not be Superman on this play.
Yeah, because he can slide, right? You turn on the tape, you see him do it. He knows how to do it. It looks pretty clean. Like, it's not like it looks super rough when he does it. Like, he knows how to do it. I remember he was asked at the scouting combine about not taking as many hits, and he started off really well. Said, I know I've got to protect my body at the next level really well. And then he goes, but at the same time, I'm a playmaker. And at the end of the day, I'm like, no, dude, stop. You have the perfect answer to start
on every play. Yeah, you don't have to always be play hero ball here.
Yeah. Absolutely. So let's get into some of the storylines that surrounded Jayden leading up to the draft that, bordered on ridiculous to rumors to just normal draft, pre-draft. I don't know what you want to call it, nonsense. But one of the storylines, the draft weekend, or not before the draft weekend, the top 30 visit to Washington. One of 20 players of the Washington Commanders brought in at the same time. One of 4 quarterbacks of the Washington Commanders brought in at the same time. And of course, there were the reactions just to that alone. But then there was also the story that Jayden Daniels himself was unhappy, mainly because the perception or the rumor was that he was unhappy because he thought the visit would be him and him alone, and he wasn't happy to share that time. Does that sound like Jayden Daniels to you?
It really doesn't. Jayden Daniels is a person a player that I came to know at LSU as never a guy that would ruffle any feathers. Like, if there was any story that came out about Jayden Daniels, it was never any sort of controversy. It was nothing that he said that would make headlines for any sort of negative thing. I would say the most negative thing that ever came out about Jayden Daniels in his time at LSU was at the Heisman ceremony. He wore a jacket lined with photos of himself hitting the Heisman. And for some reason, some people just had a really bad taste in their mouths about that. Other than that, Jayden Daniels is a very, quiet, calm, cool, collected kind of person. And that's how he plays as well. I think that kind of lends to the kind of player that he is. He never gets too high and never gets too low. If that is the truth, it really, frankly, does surprise me. Brian Kelly always tells this story about when Jayden Daniels came in 2022. There were 2 other quarterbacks in the locker room, 2 quarterbacks that had been at LSU that weren't transfers. There were a lot of guys that had been around and had been at LSU for several years. And Brian Kelly said throughout spring camp, throughout fall, as he was kind of becoming the leader in the clubhouse for being the starting quarterback, he kind of stood back a lot. Not that he didn't want to be a leader, but that he kind of knew his place in the locker room as being the newcomer. Didn't want to come in, didn't want to be overly loud and boisterous and disrupt the culture that Brian Kelly was trying to build in the locker room. But game by game, week by week, month by month, he started to gain more respect and kind of grew into that as a leader, really earned his leadership on the fields gained the respect of his players on and off the field rather than demanding it. So him feeling like he was supposed to be like the only guy, the one guy, it really doesn't sound like Jayden Daniels to me. I'm not saying that's an incorrect report. I'm just saying I would say that might be misconstrued and maybe misinterpreted more than it was absolute fact.
Resilience is kind of the last thing that I want to talk about with Jayden Daniels, because, he admitted a little bit. So it's actually interesting. He did a show with Kevin Hart. He went on Kevin Hart's show recently and kind of talked about the reason he started playing quarterback because he always wanted to have the ball in his hands. A little bit of selfishness there. And that he went to Arizona State partially because they told him he would start as a freshman. They told him, they basically promised him the job before he got on campus. But then you kind of see him 3 years later again, go to LSU. There's no guarantees there. So it kind of shows a little bit of a shift in the mentality and the maturity of a young man. And then to me, so he mentioned the Florida game last year, the LSU Florida game, where he just ripped the hearts out of any Gator fan who watched that game as long as they did. And I haven't gotten a chance to watch the entire game, but I watched enough to know that there's a reason he chose that game specifically. But what's interesting to me is the game before that one, because he's also admitted getting knocked out of the Alabama game. He thought he was done as far as Heisman's concerned. He thought, no, I'm not going to be a finalist. Forget winning the trophy. I'm not even going to be a finalist. So what does it say about Jayden Daniels to get knocked out of that Bama game and then come back in the Gators game? And in that mindset, now that we know that he basically is thinking my Heisman Trophy hopes are done, but he puts on that performance.
I think it shows his relentlessness, and he's tough. Like if I had to choose one word to describe Jayden Daniels, it's tough, and you can never count him out, whether that's, physically being injured and him doing everything he can to get back, or if it's kind of proving some preconceived notions wrong. Because if you didn't watch that LSU Alabama game, I mean, he got completely blown up. Dallas Turner hit, it was, almost airborne, hit him right in the chin and the neck area. It was a really, really scary hit. I thought his Heisman Trophy hopes were done because that was LSU's third loss on the season. You don't traditionally see 3-loss quarterbacks win the Heisman Trophy. I just thought that alone was going to knock him out of contention of the Heisman Trophy. But I think it shows his relentlessness that, he wasn't counting himself out. Maybe everybody else was. Maybe he kind of had that in the back of his head of, well, that individual accomplishment is no longer available to me. But we still got games to play. We still have games to win. We still have goals that we want to achieve. And I'm sure he had those personal goals for himself as well. If he felt like he was going to be counted out for the Heisman, then do what you can do to kind of prove all of the naysayers wrong. So I think it just kind of shows his character, his relentlessness, and his dedication to his team, that he thought even if he wasn't going to win the Heisman Trophy, he was still going to do everything that he could to help his teammates. And overall, that's just kind of the person and the player that he is. He's a competitor. And I think that's what you want in a starting quarterback and a franchise quarterback, is just kind of that relentlessness.
Yeah, absolutely. No, there's a lot of NFL quarterbacks that probably watched that hit that Dallas Turner laid on him and don't want to take that hit. And Jayden, look, he eventually got back up, record-setting game the very next week, and then went on to win the Heisman Trophy. So, like you said, toughness definitely on the resume. Caroline Fenton on Twitter at Caroline Fenton 1, host of Locked On LSU. Looking forward to watching Jayden's career here as it gets started in the NFL. Caroline, thanks for joining us.
Absolutely. Enjoy it. He's a blast to watch. All right, thanks again for making Locked On LSU your first listen every single day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts. Shout out to Locked On Commanders, and thank you to David Harrison, host of Locked On Commanders, for having me on his show, being able to break down a little bit of what Jayden Daniels brought to LSU and what he could potentially bring to the next level. Coming up on tomorrow's edition of Locked On LSU, it's a Wednesday, so you already know what it is. It's a Mailbag Wednesday, so get those questions in for the Mailbag Wednesday. You can comment them below on YouTube. You can send them in on social media. My Twitter handle is below at Caroline Fenton 1. Tweet me, DM me, comment below. I'm taking any of your questions, your comments, things that you want me to touch on, things that I haven't touched on enough, things that you want clarification on. Everything is on the table on a Mailbag Wednesday here on Locked On LSU.